You are now in the Reality Capture Network.
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network. Today, we're excited to get in and talk about new technologies with the great Kirk McKinzie. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Matthew.
So Kirk has got quite the impressive background, 31-year fire service veteran, now working on his own, right?
That's right. Since March, I had a awesome career as a first responder out there front lines, and now I've started an LLC and working on a number of 3D related reality capture items.
Well, that's great, and thank you for all your years of service. We always appreciate all of our first responders.
Thank you. It was a privilege, and the interest now is to figure out how do we save lives in 3D, and in fact, how do I support from the outside those who are still doing it to serve those they've never met, but in an instant,
that's
some 3D
awesome.
data might save a life.
Yeah, well, and I'm excited to have this conversation because, a lot of people in our network, we're focused on, active construction or, industrial engineering and things like that. And the forensic space or the first responder space, there's a big need there, but I think for the overall community, there's not quite as many people focused specifically on that. And it's a really unique but important industry and focus. So excited to hear about it. And I think it'd be great to start maybe the short story, a little bit about your background. So we could give you a few minutes here to talk about how did you get into the focus that you have in your industry?
Well, thank you. And I think I started by carrying car batteries, and I'll give that a little premise. I have a friend that did forensic animation, and I said, so you make cartoons? And no. Well, what makes it forensic? Well, person, place, time, and event in 3D. And he told me what a laser scanner was. And I thought, wow, we need that in the fire industry.
And what about what year or how long ago was that initially?
I think we're about 12 years ago.
Okay.
And so we chatted for a while about it. And then it turned out there was a fatal explosion in the community. And I was asked to come out and support the team doing the laser scanning. And then I worked carrying car batteries to keep the 5,000 measurement a second scanners running out on some remote locations, and ended up going to a fire death investigation class, 3D scanning, gritty work of forensic anthropologist in 3D, and having a friend convert the point cloud data into a 3D printable model. So how do we take perishable human remains evidence to the magistrate, to the courtroom, in front of a juror? And so I worked on that for a number of years before I started to focus on, while a documentation investigation is critical for public safety, law enforcement, fire, and the like, could we save a life in advance rather than investigate the death?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, because most of these technologies are seen as the capture what's already there. So documenting the scene is kind of the default or easy thing to do. So what was your initial thought there when you're thinking, how can we use it to proactive or save? Like, what would that step look like? Or
I think I had the chance to speak at SPAR 3D with the team, and I was out in front and saw a 3D mapping vehicle, well, several 3D mapping vehicles, right? This is in Colorado Springs, I think.
Yeah.
And and it just came to me with a fellow colleague. Late one night, we were talking about the value of 3D, and certainly in construction, documenting as a building goes up, near real-time construction. And I said, gosh, what if we could capture remote sense and put it in front of a firefighter's field of view in the dark?
Mm-hmm.
What if we had, I didn't know what it was called, computer vision. And so that was 6 years ago. And that's when I first thought, there's this thing called augmented reality. I know fighter pilots use it. And then I started to think more and more about how do we move the ball into real time.
Yeah. So what is that something that you actually then started to pursue? You said that was about 6 years ago or so. You were kind of having those thoughts. What did your next steps look like?
Well, there was a lot of internet searching, and in 2014, when you searched 3D fire or 3D fire explosion or 3D for life safety or 3D fire rescue or anything like that, there were half a dozen papers that came up about people doing crazy work. A fair amount of it in Europe. Some scientists that I'm grateful for who really helped set the stage. I'm not the only one thinking about this. Not only am I not the only one thinking about this, people working with it. And then capturing some burns done for fire investigation training. So say you put together a simulated children's bedroom, and the fire investigation trainers light the fire, let it burn till it's well involved, and then put it out, and then bring the students in and have a look. Okay, where did the fire start? What was the cause? Was it accidental? Was it intentional? And documenting that in with a scanner. And while there was still some smoke, and realizing, visible light is disrupted by the smoke and the particulates in the air. And so that was a hard stop. There's quite, we could do a whole discussion just on that, on moving into infrared remote sensing and how that's needed. And there's a few teams that are doing good work in that now, but that was one of the first failures.
Yeah.
in the concept, but gratefully there's other teams working on the IR solution, just like in self-driving cars.
Yep.
Right? There's LiDAR that's not visible light.
Yeah. And we don't have to get in depth with it, but the technology obviously is continuing to expand pretty rapidly. We just did a webinar on the iPhone now having LiDAR right on it.
Solid state.
It's continuing to just expand down to devices that you already have in your pocket that are small, that are lightweight. So I think even in applications like you're focusing on, even the hardware is just continuing to improve to make some of those things easier to do, and just more realistic and affordable even to continue pursuing.
Before you ask the next, I'd like to take a moment, and so I'm doing my best to keep the dialogue neutral, and because it's really the goal is to plug the need, and the ability to save there's 7,000 people are lost in America every day before COVID, 100 minute around the world. By fire alone in the US, more than 3,000 a year, up 20% in the last decade. And fire only, there's 1.25 million fires a year. There's 240 million calls for service on a regular basis. There's a pressure point there that we can make a difference with reality capture. Ethics. When we're talking about phones, what if in advance or during an emergency, if people used their new devices, whether it's structured light sensing, solid state LiDAR, whatever they had to offer a 3D representation of their space. So one of the teams I'll mention is a federal team under the Department of Commerce, is the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Public Safety Communication Research Group. They're doing amazing stuff there and talking about, we used to know where 911 callers were because we had their billing address. So we knew where the home was when there were landlines. Now with cells, it's harder. Well, what if there was a way to get more than just a text message to the dispatch center? What if you could show your environment in 3D? And we'll keep going, but there's a lot to cover to consider.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the way the technology is moving is making that more realistic. Prior to things like having it on a phone, it is time consuming and the data's big and you have to, process it after the fact. And as things are becoming more real time, and that potential is there, I think those types of applications are not quite as far away as they used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's in advance with someone's personal phone,
Yeah.
what do they share? Where do they share it? Where's the repository? How do you encrypt it? How do you secure it?
Mm-hmm.
And if someone doesn't want to share their information, by all means, don't share it. But for those who do, when we look at tragic loss fires, especially large loss fires where we have dozens of people lost in commercial fires who now are texting their family to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Well, what if we had the 3D layout before fire crews arrived or knew their location in 3D?
Yeah.
There's just so much to be done. Yeah.
What do you think about the comparison of, I guess maybe it's both, right? Is looking at proactively documenting and having the existing, BIM models or virtual tour information of commercial spaces now, so that when first responders do go to a building, they maybe can just open up an already existing model and lay out. What do you think about that versus like the real time people actually opening and trying to document?
Well, sure. Anything advanced would help. For over the 30 years, we had binders and then some mobile data computers with minimal 2D diagrams, especially of the high life hazard facilities. Where's the fire hydrant? Where's the fire sprinkler, connection? Where's the alarm room?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we could have the BIM. But when we look at what happened, how do we, in large loss fires, how do we convert that BIM into mixed physics computational fluid dynamic model? There's a number of teams that have done that. And one colleague of mine who's done it where you can be inside the training tower where I was working in 3D inside a fairly accurate scientific fire model in augmented reality from your phone.
Yeah.
And so those models are available. That is, they exist. They're persistent. So high rises or BIM is all stored somewhere.
Yeah.
So it exists. It's getting it to the first responders in a graphic user interface that they can ingest in real time while they're busy.
Yeah.
They're busy. They're in a rush, and there's cognitive load challenges.
Yeah.
How do we get it? I mean, really what I want, Matthew, let's just get right to it, is Ironman firefighter.
Yeah.
Right, enabled with and I see you laugh. There's a number of teams that are working on this. I'm sure I can. I hope that it's okay to mention NASA. I got to help them do a test burn where they ingested thermal data to run an AI program with the goal that maybe it could be predictive in real time for first responders. Now, got a terabyte of data on that, and then how do we interface that to the legacy land mobile radio platforms that the teams are currently using, as people at home are playing games, over the holidays with solid state LiDAR in mixed reality in their living room. So leverage gaming, entertainment, and construction technologies that you use, Nexus, leverage those for saving lives.
And would you say, and I see this question come up with a lot of different, government agencies and even, people that you would think, oh, they have the latest up-to-date hardware, like everything that's available, they have it before we're using it, in construction and other things. Would you say part of the problem is the cost of upgrading and having all the first responders have technology that could take that step, goggles and glasses and, that type of thing? Is that part of the problem?
Certainly one of the, maybe it's a 12-sided problem dice. We have funding after the last recession, the first response community really, I would say, some of my speaking opportunities where I say I think we've lost a decade in productivity, I see chief officers nodding their head because there was such a huge impact to the general funds for public safety agencies that there was just no progress. They limped along with what they could. The economy turned around. Great. Okay, now we can start moving again. But there was a technology moved a decade ahead for the consumer. And to the enterprise teams, thanks for what you're building for the consumers. They need to monetize it. Totally understand that. First response community may be considered narrow, difficult to penetrate. People, policy, and procedure that are not necessarily slow to adapt, but are limited in their adaptive abilities. And to take on new tech that may and may not work when they're working on keeping the legacy systems alive. Well, there's lots to consider there. And then privacy, ethics, trust, and we can do a whole show just on that.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing with new technology and with different industries is sometimes it is hard to mix that gap. You know, if the company's creating the hardware or focusing on the solutions and building out workflows, are, you know, they find an industry that's easier to get buy-in, then, you know, others might get put off a little bit. What do you think the industry and us that are focused on technologies could do in an effort to try to help that process? Is there something, or does it really have to be like between the hardware, software, and the agencies?
Well, gratefully, there's dozens of teams internationally that are working on the solve for this, and some are doing it pretty effectively. Parts of it are already for the average consumer, and I like the 3P option, the public-private partnerships that allow enterprise and public safety agencies to do proof of concepts and show that there's some efficacy with it. As we look to what does next gen 911 look like? It's not sending a text message or an image to the dispatch center. It's next gen 911 is capable of so much more. I like the analogy of, and rather than building it just for first responders, build it for everybody else, and then harden it, encrypt it, secure it, make it heat resistant for first responders. But the platform that I like to use is the idea of, most people have heard of Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
What if we had something we could call 911 Go, where everyone's phone was enabled with the exit pathways in 3D for active shooter, earthquake, flood, fire, other natural man-made disasters, and they knew the layouts. And so there's a number of teams that are working on how do we make that lean and effective, especially for interiors, and and then how do we get it to first responders? So there's a lot of we don't know the answers to, and there's a lot of great progress happening right now, just because of that we're in the first technology revolution, or the fourth industrial revolution, the first data revolution, whatever we want to call it. And let me ask you, Matthew, how long have you been in 3D reality capture industry? Because I don't know enough about you.
Yeah, so about 10 years or so. That's when we first got into laser scanning. Prior to that, really the focus was conventional land survey, so GPS and total stations. So still in the measurement world, but laser scanning for that application was our first introduction to anything in the 3D technology at all. And then, of course, as soon as you get into one of them, you start seeing the need and the benefits and the application for just all different directions. Before that, I never worked in buildings. We didn't do surveys for architectural and interior. And now that we got into scanning and 3D modeling and figuring out these applications, we're seeing it used in, forensic sites and in defect investigations and marine and boats and underground tunnels. Every industry is finding a need and a way to apply these, whether it's for helping with safety or investigation or engineering or construction, really all over the place.
And excellent. Thank you for that background. And when we think of the last decade, right? So I think it's 12 years for me that I was first exposed to total stations, right? Highly accurate Laser is a highly accurate linear measurement tool. And then I'm carrying car batteries for scanners at 5,000 measurements a second, and then 50,000 measurements a second. And now, holy cow, the stuff that's out and the stuff that is right on the verge of being out, like videogrammetry. Everybody's going to have a 360 high def camera on the top of their car, and we're going to do videogrammetry. And that's my expectation. And then how do we, when the first responders, a fire engine arrives to wildfire that may be small or not so small, how does incident command, who may be 10 miles away on a large wildfire, understand that while the firefighters are trying to get the job done, command's asking for a condition report? They've got to push the button on the radio and paint a picture with words when it could be being streamed live in 360 video today at a minimum. And then, it could be streaming in videogrammetry, right? That's really, it's not being done, but I think, or maybe there's some engineers doing it already, but conceptually it could be done today, and you have 5G around the corner. So from total stations to this conversation in a decade, wow.
Yeah. I know, it's crazy. And things even continue to change rapidly every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, the hardware and software both improving. And I think one thing that's interesting, and you talk about how it can help safer actions as well, right? I think the idea of having some autonomy, whether it's through like the Spot robotic dog or whether it's through drones, in scenarios where we do have to do investigating or areas sending into hazardous areas, or maybe even doing some visual around a fire prior to people going into it. I think finding ways to even continue that expansion would be helpful.
Oh, agreed. And with machine vision and ML and AI, I think the autonomous vehicles, whether terrestrial or airborne based, is a great set of teams that we ought to be paying closer attention to.
Yeah. Okay.
They're pushing the ball.
I know we're limited on time, but so I want to kind of have an opportunity. I think we started well in just understanding even where you're coming from with your view on the technology and where you're going. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what is your current focus? So obviously you've had a long history in fire, and you got introduced to the technology, you said maybe 12 years ago or so, and you've retired and you're consulting now. What's your actual current focus?
Well,
which might be diverse, or share what you can.
Oh yeah, happy to share what I can. There is some NDAs that I'll be respecting. And to be fair, I was expecting to go another 4 years of active duty, and in March I think I could do more for my brother and sister firefighters that I spent 25 years with, and the hundreds that I know around the world. I can do more for them from the outside, and defining that path is yet defined. But there's several teams I'm working with, from indoor mapping to tracking personnel in an LTE denied environment. How do we keep track of our personnel for a Mayday when there's no cell signal? And some teams working on the end game. So I'm from also immersive learning environments, virtual mixed reality applications. A number of teams doing great work on that. How do we train? How do we educate the public in new realities, in digital realities, about fire and life safety? Especially during COVID, we used to get kindergartners in the firehouse, and we teach them stop, drop, and roll lighters and matches, or for grown-ups, get out of the house and stay out. And then we might not see them until they crash their car as a teenager, or have an accidental kitchen fire in their 30s and chest pain in their 50s. And we need to update the way we message. And so doing that public education in VR is one of the things that's really interesting. Training firefighters in immersive learning on the way to, working with a couple big teams. So my interest is to work with teams of teams around the world. I'd say over the last 3 years, I've been in dialogue with well over 100 teams to facilitate strategic alignment to the various teams.
Yeah.
Whether they're the Fortune 100 teams, the big enterprise teams that have got a great head start on a lot of good things. They're doing it for consumers now, but they don't have a public safety background.
Yeah.
And how do I bridge that to the Fire Chiefs Association that have over 10,000 fire chiefs representing several million firefighters, representing 4.5 billion connected people?
Yeah.
How do we, but bringing them together, I think that's my biggest focus is how do I connect the dots of the various team members, large and small, that I'm working with, from startups to the big teams, to help those people we'll never meet. Matthew, I think that I guess I'd like to be the equivalent of the smart firefighting digital equivalent to the smoke detector, which may have saved more lives than all firefighters in history. The smoke detector has been very effective, and thank you to whoever put that together.
Yeah.
and has it in most homes. Please check your smoke detector batteries today. New ones are the new smoke detectors have a 10-year battery, but regardless, make sure they're there, make sure they're working.
Yeah.
Because we lose 8 people a day on average in America to fire.
Yeah. And so do you think there's an opportunity, and are you looking at things like even that, right? You bring up the smoke detector. It's a device that's installed in every building that is supposed to go off in a warning. Do you see a focus on, like, obviously we've talked about wearables and vision for going into a fire, but do you then see an opportunity of, hey, here's an actual way to bring these reality capture technologies into a device or something that is going to be everywhere that helps the next gen? Or is it starting with the mapping?
It's all together, Matthew. I think that, and so first off, the smart smoke and heat detectors, right, are IoT sensors that could be streamed in real time, and a holographic light display of the 3D of a building, like Princess Leia from, most people are familiar with Star Wars. Not plugging, but I did appreciate I was there for the first Star Wars.
There you go.
The holographic light display inside the first responder's vehicle that shows the 3D plan of the building and what detectors activated. And then if in their 4-minute response to that building, especially say a high rise, they got 1,000 citizens above the fire floor, if that holographic light display becomes 5 or 10 active sensors, we've got a big situation. Strike a second or third alarm, a general alarm.
Yep.
And then how do we get AI in there to do, like I said, CFDs, and they're limited in their abilities to be accurate to how a fire is going to spread, yet it's something. And how do we get those IoT sensors in real time into everything's designed in 3D. You don't even need to, right? Some teams are taking old 2D paper drawings and converting them to 3D models. So limited by our imagination only, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's a lot of things that are happening even just now with the focus on digital twins and with making, replicas of buildings, even where right now, a lot of the scanning is happening when there's a renovation project, when there's a construction job. But now starting to put a bigger focus on, well, let's do it for every building so the firms know the assets that they have in there and where they are. So that data is now becoming more available in buildings. And then I think, like you said, how do we get that into a usable, shareable, secure, light enough weight that it can be used for all the different applications as opposed to just one?
Yeah, ingestible and some sort of GUI. And the other enterprise group we should be talking about is the insurance companies for helping lower their exposure. And how do we, partner with them to make for safer, more secure communities? And you mentioned the digital twin. Yeah, it's the platform of it's the foundation for smart cities.
Yeah,
the whole world persists in 3D. We just want to make it more accurate, more have better efficacy, and make it ingestible for citizens and those who are serving them.
Yeah. One question, I guess, and this even steps back a little bit instead of going futuristic, but even when we talk about some of the basics the application of laser scanning and fire investigation. You're closer to that than I am. Do you think that even just that simple process is already widely adopted, or do you think that there's still need to educate and push even on some of those basic principles?
I'd go with the latter, most assuredly.
Yeah, that was my assumption.
The National Fire Protection Association is a standards organization with, I think, upwards of 50,000 members, and I had the privilege of writing and suggesting that it should be effectively a expectation that things are laser scanned on line of duty deaths, on multi-casualty citizen fires, large loss fires. It should just be expected. I did get a little bit in there. It got trimmed down to be a couple sentences about that the fire investigator may choose to under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
So, but I guess here's the, and I started training to be an investigator and realized, oh, this is a whole career. This is a 30-year right. I could easily spend 30 years just learning about investigation, about how to document and explain why the fire progressed. And then I thought, but I got in the business to try and help people. So I want to work more on the now instead of reconstructing things. So, but the thing that I think will paint the picture is I go out for training and take 500 images of a building that were not then not put into a photogrammetry model.
Yeah.
There's 500 images of, what if it's a 6,000 square foot home?
Yeah.
Is that a major,
where was this
fire?
Picture taken?
Exactly. Thank you. Bingo.
Yeah.
And so trying to manage it in the legacy manner. Oh goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So the ability to have the 3D data of the entire structure. And then I think even, and there's some platforms that are already doing this, but I could see the value of just even expanding that capability of, quickly documenting the overall layout, then still being able to do your kind of high-res images of certain objects that are then still geospatially tagged, and making sure all that information is in there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Put the basic 2D images, put them into the photogrammetry model.
Yeah.
And then when we get down to the area of origin, okay, let's capture that really accurately. And then maybe when we think it's an accidental fire, here's a device that's a suspect. Let's put it on a turntable and make a photogrammetry model of this, especially because most of it, a lot of it is in some way or another perishable because it's been partially burned. It's fragile.
Yeah.
How do so document it while it's still intact?
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the other, apart from documenting fires, are there some other things that you see, current technologies that are currently available to help in your pursuits that aren't, trying to figure out next steps or technology that's on the verge of, but what are some realistic current applications?
Well, there's a number of current phone applications where one can just do at least a 2D diagram of the building, real basic, using the inertial sensors on the phone and the visible light camera, just 2D diagram of the building. And then we get into, there's structured light sensing on many new phones. Could use that. Could bring in kits to do photogrammetry, and on the way up to laser scan stuff. And so there's a lot that's available right now. And a number of teams working with it, but I would not say it's pervasive in the industry, not yet. There are some strong leaders moving the ball, and the question does keep coming up for me.
Yeah. And here would be another question. Obviously, there's a lot of different service providers. We do it as well. We do scanning. We haven't pushed heavy into forensic side and working with public agencies, we've done a little bit of support. But we have heard a lot from others around the country in different areas that it's sometimes really hard to get into, specifically people that have talked with like highway patrols or police departments that are trying to offer to, document car accidents or things. Usually they say that if they're going to get into it, they would probably only do it internally versus using a contractor. And then we've heard others that, their full-time role is supporting the scanning of scenes for police departments. Is it the same process? Is a fire department potentially interested in actually having a service provider come in and help with that process? Or is it really they investigate the technologies and have to do it internally? What would you suggest there? Because I know a lot of service providers out there, they want to figure out how can we actually help, within our communities, and we see that as a potential if they're not already using it. But sometimes people don't know how they go about actually being involved.
Yeah, good question, and I think it's going to be jurisdiction dependent. The local highway patrol here has a major accident investigation team, and they have their own scan equipment. But is there an incident that deserves being documented, and it's not big enough to bring out the big team, or the big team's already on a bigger call someplace else, right? There's a limited number of resources, and I think there's upwards of 35 or more than 40,000 fire departments in the country. So that's 40,000 answers that you could choose from.
All are individual.
Yeah, there's 429 dispatch centers in the state of California. We lose 7,000 people a day in America before COVID. And based on CDC death rates, 8 per 1,000 in America on average, which is pretty much a fairly average international, ranging from I think 4 to 14 per 1,000. I said go to your local jurisdiction and introduce yourself and say this is what we do, and would you be interested in a proof of concept on the drill grounds? Right in a training scenario, just show and tell. That can be highly effective. I would still say a good portion of emergency medicine, law enforcement, and fire personnel, the first response community, and we could let's just go ahead and talk about peacekeepers and warfighters while we're at it. A good portion of them, like the average citizen around the world, does not understand the difference between phase space and a time of flight laser scanning. Or RBG, structured light sensing, or stereoscopic infrared. It's new. It's not new to you and I. Yeah, I still feel like we're pioneers here. There's no experts here. We're all pioneers. But for the average citizen, and they may even have solid state LiDAR on their new device and are using it and doing stuff with it. Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we sometimes forget, being that we've been in it for a long time. But I still try to tell people, as much as we think scanning is all over the place, if you randomly call up a company, even if they're in an industry that definitely needs it or it's being used or adopted, 8 out of 10 people have no idea what a laser scanner is or does, so there's so much room for education.
It'd be great to get the statistics on that. Where are we on it? But I like the show and tell method. Yeah, if there's a group you want to get out to, go and see them. And if there's something specific, your listeners are welcome to reach out to me. I'll do what I can to answer.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know you've got just a couple minutes left. You do have another meeting to get to. Is there any kind of last words that you'd like to focus on here for the last few minutes? Either something you're pursuing or something you'd like to share?
I guess most of all, thank you, Matthew. Thanks for having me on your show, and specifically to your last set of questions around how does someone engage with their local public safety community, because you're a leader. You're showing and telling and saying, hey, look, what do you think? We're posing the question, and so thank you for doing that with so many colleagues you've had on your show already, and those that maybe I'll recommend to you for future shows on what's coming in this 3D digital world we live in.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. We started this because we just see this again, like we've talked about through all industries, just the need for education. My goal is to get somebody from every industry, every application imaginable on here to share about it and talk about it, because we have professionals come on like you. Okay, well, if on the marketing side we can push this in front of more fire departments, well, now they can listen to the applications and the needs and the technology available versus having to visit every single one of them. We just want to spread that education, and so that more people can benefit from the knowledge of others and knowing that the technology is there and how it can be used. And hopefully also, when we get into some more of the technical discussions, avoid mistakes. You don't want to purchase the wrong piece of gear for your need, or, kind of make sure there's realistic expectations as well.
Good on you. Appreciate that. Yeah, because certainly there's been some mistakes along the way that others should monopolize on those who've gone before.
Yeah. Well, again, we appreciate you for your time, and again for your service. I think your mission of not just how can we use these technologies, but to actually use them to help save a life and for our communities. I don't think there's a much better mission than that. So thank you. And we look forward to seeing if there's ways we can continue to support that. And we'll follow up with you again.
We'll continue the dialogue, and I'm looking forward. Thank you, Matthew.
All right. Thank you.
Reality Capture Network, bringing the future to you.